This is a Q Media production.
Welcome to Leading Change. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Lata Hamilton, a change and leadership confidence expert and author of Pioneer Your Career Change. Lata has led transformative projects at some of Australia's largest companies, impacting over 100,000 people. She's worked on everything from major operating model changes to global cultural shifts and digital transformations, bringing deep insights into what truly drives successful change in business. In this conversation, Lata shares her approach to getting people on board with change, how to build trust and create psychological safety, and why systems alone won't drive transformation. We also dive into the common gaps in capability and how many organizations face them while trying to implement change, and how to avoid them. If you are looking to lead with more confidence and navigate change with clarity, this episode is packed with valuable insights. Let's dive in. Lata, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, we hear the word transformation. It's probably one of the most overused words in business these days. What is your definition of transformation?
For me, when I think about transformation, because I am a change manager, so we often tend to work in the transformation space because they are the big bucket things that are happening that often need that change support. But for it to really truly be transformation, I think you have to be fundamentally changing the way that people do that sort of business. So whatever it is that they're doing, how are they actually doing that? What are the culture, ways of working, capability that enables them to unlock new opportunities, possibilities, pathways in the future? If you're not doing that, if you're not actually changing the way that things are happening around the change, then really it's just a little tweak, it's just a little upgrade, maybe just a bit of continuous improvement. I wouldn't count that as transformation. So for example, if you're just upgrading a system and you're not changing the way that people use and operate and work around that system and how they interact with each other, how they interact with their customers, their clients, their community, whoever their stakeholders are, then it's just a system upgrade. It's not a digital transformation. And, when we're investing millions of dollars in these projects and in these solutions, we want to be getting to transformation. Otherwise, what's the point? Sometimes there's some hygiene things where we do need to get the foundations in place. But yeah, if we're going to be going down the path of transformation, let's make sure it's real transformation.
Tell me about, say, one of the biggest transformations you've worked on.
So, I work on I've worked with really large corporates, so really massive transformations where they, one, for example, was an enterprise agreement affecting 100,000 people's pay. Now, technically, that's just a little change, right? How hard is it to change from one enterprise agreement to the next enterprise agreement? But as you started to actually scope in, what did that truly mean to people? What did that truly mean in their day-to-day? What did that truly mean for their pay and what that would mean in their personal lives? And so, there was a system aspect to that. There was obviously a financial pay and aspect to it as well. And then there was also, how does that make people feel in their life and in their work? And so how can we transform in a way, some of those aspects of that transformation? It's starting to actually tease out, part of why we realized that actually that could have been a full transformation if we had addressed it that way, was that actually some of the aspects of the enterprise agreement did need for people to change the way that they worked. That was required as part of it. So yeah, and then some of the ones that I work on with, say, more my medium-sized clients, they are enterprise resource platforms, so ERP systems that literally change every single function. They touch every single function in the organization. Every single person uses that function, sometimes even including customers and clients. And so when we're thinking about those sorts of transformations, again, it's if you're thinking about how to rewire and rework how business is built from the ground up, potentially starting from the finance module. And then because, you need to be able to pay people, receive money, and then do financial reporting for compliance. So from the finance side, but then every other module or function on top of that, and how they all interweave and interlace together. And then the ones that I love working on the most, because I think it's so ripe for opportunity, is operating model changes. So I've worked on really major operating model changes that have impacted over like 10,000 people's roles. And while they are scary, they are probably the most emotive transformations. But you can do so much with them because you can really reset how teams are not only structured, but you can reset things like leadership capability, the skills and capability of individuals, how those individuals work together and the flows and the channels of those individuals, as well as starting to create that new culture, those new ways of working along the way. So I love operating model changes. They are very complex and very emotive, and there's a lot of requirements often needed to do it in a compliant way, but then also successfully. But the business growth opportunity off the back of that can be absolutely incredible and exciting. And yeah, just so much potential.
So the projects that you've mentioned, particularly things like, an enterprise agreement or even a restructure, sometimes businesses, particularly maybe not the huge ones, but certainly small and medium, will not really think about getting a change manager in for those sorts of changes. And I love how you beautifully illustrated that it's not just the change, it's not just the project, it's all those extras that come around it that actually create that value. So if somebody is leading the change and for whatever reason doesn't have the budget or doesn't want to get somebody in from a change management perspective, as a change leader, what are some of the things that they can do while setting up to make sure they do start to get some of those outcomes that you've just talked about?
Look, there's some really basic principles that I think any leader can go into leading a change with that makes you just a good leader generally, like whether we're leading change or anything else. So for example, like one of them I think is just putting people first and recognizing that people don't change just because you want them to, just because you tell them to. Like there are so many subtle ways for people to behind the scenes, do a workaround or keep doing things in the old way. And they don't necessarily transition the way that you want them to or transform the way that they're working the way that you expect them to. So just recognizing that and then really thinking, okay, if we want this to be successful, we have to put people first. And that's not to say that whatever it is that you're delivering, whether it's a new building site, whether it's a technology, it's not to say that that's not important, but who's going to be using it? People. So it's kind of, I always think of it like that tree falling in the forest. Like if there's nobody around to hear it, did it make a sound? I think the same when it comes to change and transformation, where it's like, if you put in this new system and nobody likes it, wants it, or uses it, was there any point? Like did you even really implement a new system? Not really. So put people first. The second one would be transparency around communication. Often people, it's not the change that people are scared of. It's when there's radio silence around it. So keeping people informed along the way, like deciding what that communication cadence will be and then sticking to it. And the third one is be open and transparent and human. Because again, most of the time, people are, while they are thinking about how it's going to affect them and how it's going to impact them, a lot of people come to work because they like being part of that bigger collective. So there's been changes that I've worked on where the very first thing that I've done as part of that change is an apology. And I didn't even work on the change before. So the background is that there had been a new application and new mobile devices rolled out to this team of 200 people 2 years prior. And it wasn't fit for purpose and the change management was non-existent for that. And the technology wasn't great either. So even the hardware was sort of falling apart. So 2 years later, out of 100 devices, only 10 were still actively being used. And out of those, I think a few of them were actually still broken. It just not usable, not even usable. So going into that, here's where that sort of that trust and honesty and transparency comes in. It's just we're sorry. Do you know what I mean? Just an apology, own it and acknowledge it, because you might as well, people are thinking it anyway. You might as well own it and be upfront, because that can create a brand new blank slate for you to build that trust for the upcoming change. So we, brought in a new application, mobile application, new devices, and we're rolling that out. And we took a really people-focused approach, a lot of communication, a lot of training, a lot of support. involving people along the way as well. So, getting users involved along the course of design and testing, and then the training and the rollout. And it was just worlds apart, to the point that a few months later, so I'd already left that organization, but a few months later, people were asking for more features of those devices and that technology. So they were not only using it, but they were also actively now starting to take responsibility and ownership for using it into the future. So any leader can do that at any time. You don't have to be a change management practitioner to do that, but just taking some of those principles. And I guess that's kind of outwards. But if you think about you as a leader, I also like to really sort of, advise my consulting clients. I'm remember that you're not just leading change, you're also often receiving change. Especially if you're maybe an executive or a senior leader. Sometimes there's changes that might be flowing down from your board or from your CEO or from your C-suite that you are expected to then cascade to your people. So recognizing that you're both leading and receiving change, as well as sometimes instigating and driving change yourself, but you're leading and receiving change. So, being kind to yourself and having some compassion for the fact that it is super hard to be holding space for all your people, even though you too are impacted by the change as well.
That is such great advice. And I think we do often forget that we have to take leaders on the exact same journey as we do everyone else. I think your example, of the failed rollout, yours was mobile device, but I'm pretty sure every listener has been the recipient of some really, really poorly delivered change. And one thing that I come across sometimes is that, it's actually sometimes the culture of the organization to not want to do the things that you've suggested, not wanting to create that vision and communicate clearly and engage people and ask them what they want. And, it sounds like great advice, but sometimes these organizations, just the way that they are, maybe it's their leaders, don't really encourage that kind of behavior. So if you have you come into organizations like that, and what do you do? How do you address those situations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we still are coming up against a lot of command and control in organizations, especially if the leaders have been around in time, say the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, where command and control to a certain extent worked. To a certain extent, there was that respect for authority and for your hierarchy and, the operational cadences that there were. And I think for really big corporates that I've worked in, that still absolutely is the case. And it's not necessarily command and control necessarily, but you might have so many layers that you are trying to influence. And it's if the cascade of the change and not just the buy-in, but the advocacy and support of the change, if it breaks at any stage, you can have whole buckets of 200 people who have never received a message or the understanding or the information that the rest of an entire business of, thousands of people have received. I do always actually think that change goes both directions. So I like to talk about leader-led, top-down change, where you do cascade and you do use those formal structures and hierarchies to deliver change down the line. And then also the bottom-up grassroots approach, where you start to activate individuals, which could be not just your change champions, but also finding pockets of the organization where maybe there are challenges and listening to those groups, or maybe pockets of a team where there are some people who have very valid concerns that maybe people haven't been listening to, giving them the opportunity to vent those and potentially be part of the solution. Because if you can bring a detractor on board to become a supporter, that not only changes that person's perspective, but it also can sometimes create buy-in and trust for a whole heap of other people too. Because they're well, if that person who could be very influential, if that person's now on board and, singing from the same hymn book, it can potentially have them being a supporter of the change as well. So if we move from command and control, I think that genuinely there is also this fear amongst leaders where they feel like the world is resting on their shoulders, that they have to be the ones that come up with all of the solutions, and they have to be the ones that, solve all the problems, and they have to be the ones that make all the decisions. And that pressure is sometimes, I think, the reason why leaders want to look infallible. They want to look like they are, that they've got everything in hand. And this is where a bit of that vulnerability bit of that transparency and honesty can come in. So sometimes how I've approached it has been actually doing some coaching or some conversations with those more senior people. So as a consultant, I'll often be sort of like the trusted change advisor to CEOs, general managers, managing directors, and having those deep, honest conversations with them. And then we're given the opportunity, I can start to potentially, run, in some cases, I've run a vision setting workshop with a senior leadership team and gotten them really excited about what the future looks like. Or I've run a future state workshop with an executive team and help them understand or put down into words what the current challenges are, but then really get tapped into what the opportunities and benefits could be if we were to get this right, this transformation right in the future. So sometimes it is about, again, taking that more almost like an engaging hearts and minds, switching on hearts and minds approach with that leadership level, because they can be so bogged down in the struggle of leadership and the administration of management that it gives them that space and that time to just breathe. And then sometimes as well, it's about showing how they're currently doing things is not working. So if you've got maybe like a project or a transformation that's maybe 50% of the way through, so this has happened with projects that I've worked on before, it's 50% of the way through, half the stuff has already been built or designed or decided or done, and they've never engaged any end users, they've never engaged any impacted teams, they've done everything behind a closed door, in an ivory tower, in a dark basement, in a war room. So it's kind of then going, okay, how's that working? Like, you're hearing the feedback, you're seeing that that's not changing, so that's not working for you. And then again, tapping into what would you like the experience to be for your people? If you could wave a magic wand and have this be a complete and utter success. Because often when I'm doing, say, a vision setting workshop with a team, with a project team or an executive team or a board, it's the moment when they think and feel about how people would feel and what they're truly there for, which is often their team. It's often a people benefit. Like, that's why they're showing up to work. That's why they're in business. That's why they're leading this business, is because they want to help people. When you tap them into that, that's when I've seen, grown men, baby boomers with tears in their eyes, or big smiles on their faces, because they've suddenly become emotionally attached to the possibilities of the future and what that could mean for people.
I love that you're able to do that. And, it's funny, I think sometimes we can see the opposite of that. We can get into that room, that workshop, and the people in there, each one has a different opinion because they each have conflicting areas that they look at after in the business, and no, it's mine, and no, it's mine. And they all want to take either responsibility or they disagree. So clearly you've been able to get them all on the same page, facing the same direction, creating the same vision. What are some of the tactics that you use to actually get them all looking the same direction?
I have to say that one of the best, most effective things is to go and meet with every single leader individually. It can take time, absolutely. And there's even been times where I've gone and met with every single change champion individually. That's like 50 one-on-one conversations. But it was worth it to build that connection, build that relationship, build that trust, and be able to give people that safe and private space where they, have that sense of psychological safety to actually share their specific situation on a personal level, for their team, for their department, for their function, whatever it is. So going and doing that, and then being able to come together, not necessarily sharing back people's deepest, darkest secrets or honest feedback. That's not the purpose of it, but coming together then and going and knowing in the back of your mind, this is what everybody actually wants. They just haven't been able to articulate it. So I'll often do like a future state workshop where I'll do benefits mapping. So with the benefits mapping, I use a neuro-linguistic programming, so NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, NLP tool, which is called chunking up. And the idea is that when you chunk up to a higher level concept, like a higher level idea or concept, more people, you get agreement. So more people can feel aligned to that higher level concept. When you chunk down, so when you go down, dive down into the detail, that's where you can start to get disagreement. That's where you can start to get preferences and get differences of opinion. So like a really good example is like I live in the Sydney CBD. I have a 2-bedroom apartment and I have a beautiful garden terrace and I'm in a fully serviced building, and that really works for me. That's my house, right? Somebody else might hate that idea. They might want to be off in the suburbs with a big plot of land and, like 6-bedroom house and a pool or something like that. Other people might want to be out in the countryside, like that's there. So like everybody has their different preferences of the personal house. But if we were to chunk up and go more higher level, we can ask the question, for what purpose? For what purpose is a house? For what purpose is a home? And we can chunk up, chunk up, chunk up. So I'll do this as a group, like with whatever group it is, if it's a board, executive team, senior leadership team, project team, sometimes even just an individual stakeholder. That might be the only person that I have available, right? Who I can like do this exercise with. So then we'll chunk up, ask for what purpose, what's the intention of that? And like if we were to chunk up from a person's home, we might go to, like the city, country, world, universe. And like we can all agree, right? At that high level, that universe, the universe is a pretty cool place to be, and that we're all really lucky to be here, sitting here today. So that's where everybody can agree that the universe is a great place for us to live, even if we have individual preferences around houses. So we want to try and get people connected around those universal concepts and those universal things that everybody can get behind. So we'll often do benefits mapping in the future state workshop. And then the second part of it will often be the vision setting. And we use a lot of the benefits mapping to help inform the vision. And when I do vision setting, I love to do it like we follow a particular process and sort of criteria around the vision. But I love to also make sure that it's covering all the different areas and groups of people. So it's very people focused, that it covers like the business and the people in the business and the team, that it covers the project or the leadership team, whoever I'm doing the vision setting with, and like what do they want to get out of it? Because they're stakeholders as well. And then also customers, clients, or community, because we want to have that internal and external view. Those two things together, so say that's a half-day future state workshop, those two things together can create so much alignment and positivity and inspiration and empowerment that sets that foundation for success. But what it also does is it creates like incredible fodder for you to then draw out like key messages and change narrative and change benefits that you can use across communications and messaging for the change. And you've got that real emotional buy-in already. Like it's resonant with people because everybody looks to their leader for guidance and support and advice. So it comes from a really real place instead of, I think, a lot of the technical benefits. Like I'm all for, saving money and getting more sales. Like I actually love the profit imperative of for-profit companies. Like I think it's really clean and I think it's really clear, and I don't think that we should hide away from the fact that we want to make money, save money. It's very clean and pure. Saying that, that's often not the only thing that drives people. We need to have a holistic view of what it is that's driving people, how we can switch people on, and what experience we really truly want to give people.
Do you want your team to achieve peak performance? Well, then it's time for a change. Welcome to Leading Edge. We're not about traditional training. We're about transformation. Our outcomes-based leadership development programs focus on real results through behavior change and mindset shifts. We customize programs tailored to your team's needs, packed with cutting-edge content based on neuroscience and positive psychology. We run engaging workshops, personalized coaching sessions, and practical exercises to ensure an enriching experience for your team. How does it work? We dive deep. We start with surveys to identify strengths and gaps, which helps us to design a bespoke program designed for your team's success. With our approach, progress is inevitable. Our expertly facilitated workshops and coaching sessions ensure growth, and the results speak for themselves. Are you ready to take the leap? It's simple. First, choose your program. We have 5 to choose from, or you can customize a program to suit your team's needs. Second, pick your duration. We deliver 3, 6, or 12-month programs. This way, we can reinforce the learnings over time to drive real change. And finally, plan with us. Each team is different, so we make sure that what we're delivering is exactly what you need. Let's unlock your team's potential together. Contact us today, and let's start this journey to transform your team to achieve greatness. So earlier you talked about some of the massive transformations you run, particularly technology ones, which system-based. So ERP systems, like systems that run the entire business. Now, often a vendor will come into a business and they need to replace their system, and the vendor will sell the dream. I'm sure we've all seen it, these gorgeous video demo presentations, whiz bang, and then suddenly we buy the product and skip to a few months later, and suddenly it doesn't do what we want it to do, and it doesn't quite match what we saw in that demo. How did we get there? What goes wrong?
Yeah, I've definitely experienced this, as I'm sure you have as well. Look, it is that bit of that shiny object, and I think it is a little bit of the vendors selling the dream, and it's not their fault. Like, they have a job to do, and they probably do have a very robust technology solution. I think what is often missing is the practicality of how that actually gets implemented into an organization. So if I think about a lot of technology vendors that my projects or my clients have worked with, like, their role, their job is to really get the technology created. So like designed, developed, put into the organization. Where they sort of often stop and fall short is that implementation, where it's like, well, who are the actual users of that? And how are they going to come on board the journey along the way? But then also, how are we actually going to make sure that we change the culture, ways of working, and capability of the organization to support that new technology coming in? Particularly like things like, I always talk about sort of online processes and offline processes. So a lot of my clients will say, well, the system is best practice. It does it all for you. It's so intuitive.
It is perfect out of the box.
Yeah. We're taking it out of the box. We're not customizing it. And then suddenly, like, you're like, okay, then why is it taking like a year? Like, there is customization. Every solution needs to be customized to your business in some way, whether that's the features being set up, so the actual decision-making around that, or whether it is some actual customized build. There's always a level of customization, because especially like every business is structured differently and has different decisions to make around how they want to, say, for example, structure their finance, reporting and things like that. So there is that level of actually understanding. I think that in a lot of cases, the processes are missed. So requirements aren't gathered because it's like, well, we're putting this solution in, so that's that be all and end all. So sometimes current process mapping is missed. But the problem is, when you miss current process mapping, in a lot of organizations, people don't know how they do what they do today. So trying to sell them on the dream is really hard, because they think what they're doing today is best practice. Like, who shows up to work and knows that they're doing things incorrect? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, poorly. Like, they're doing the best they can. And in NLP, this is actually a saying in NLP, they're doing the best they can with the resources that they have. So they're doing what they're doing. They don't know how they do what they do. They don't know what those flows of data or decision-making or approvals or workflows and things are. So then you are trying to get them to buy into this vision, this dream of this new whiz-bang, shiny, flashy technology. And they are like so stuck in what they're currently doing. They can't even see, they haven't even opened their eyes to it. They haven't even opened their ears to hear the possibility. So sometimes just by taking that step back and doing current process mapping, it means it's actually an engagement activity, not just a technical activity, like not just one for technical design and build and discovery. It's actually an engagement activity where you can connect with your people and help them understand what they're doing today, the bugbears and pain points. So taking almost like a human-centered design or user-driven approach, what are the bugbears and pain points of that? Then being able to say, this new system will actually solve X, Y, Z. So going current process mapping, future process mapping. I see process mapping missed all the time. And it doesn't matter if I'm working in a big corporate or if I'm working with a medium-sized consulting client. It's missed so often, which means then you don't have really clear requirements. You don't have really clear, as is to be processes.
Which drives your change planning because
Change
you
your
actually know
drive,
exactly what the
drives
change is.
drives training. Like how do you rock up to end user training and go, here's what you're going to do in the future? If you don't know what people currently do now, how do you tell them what to stop, start, and continue if you don't know what they currently do?
So if an organization doesn't have a business analyst, they again don't have a budget or just don't want to get one, can we do something as simple as putting some boxes onto a PowerPoint just to get something in front of you?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned, use it as an engagement opportunity because once people feel heard, and like people love talking about what they do and how they do what they do. So just punching it down, like I'm often just use PowerPoint. I don't use like some whiz bang Visio, like, do you know what I mean? Like, or process mapping software or whatever. I just like using whatever tools are available. Sometimes as well for clients, I'll give them, I kind of call it like, like in school, I used to have like the picture and it was like it looked like the same picture, but you had to spot the difference. So you had to be like, oh, like the sun's missing a ray there and the duck, has 3 eyes instead of 2, whatever it was, like the spot the difference activity. I'll sometimes like give to my clients like this spot the difference template, which is a simple thing that they can give to each of their teams, which literally just says like, what's the thing you're trying to do? How do you do it today? How will you do it in the future? Because that also empowers individual teams and individual leaders to start thinking through how to change what they're currently doing and like, again, articulate. So sometimes you might not have the time or the resources or the inclination to run a full process mapping workshop, but at least providing them some tools and maybe even a bit of support, helping them work through, understand how the template works. And then you could potentially collect all those templates back. And then at least that gives you some groundwork. And again, people feel like they've been heard. They feel like they have had some sort of hand in the design and the development, which creates so much, it does so much of the work down the track around engagement when you actually need to implement.
I've seen it so many times that, we come into a business where the vendor has said, don't worry, we can help you with this. We can help you with the requirements. We can help you with whatever customizations. We'll run workshops for you. But they actually know nothing about the business processes that are actually going on. And sometimes they might not actually ask the right question. So, do you want to turn this thing on or off? And go, yeah, we'll have that on. Why not? Looks great. Without actually realizing what the impact is downstream. So I completely understand why it's so important to do that. And I think really the key takeout is, as a business, don't let your vendor own your delivery. You've got to have some ownership on that. When you've seen that happen, because I've often come in and it's been at the tail end, they've gone, hey, can you help? Because we don't think this thing's going to work. If you've seen that happen, what are the downstream impacts? What happens in a project?
I think a lot of the time, like where I've really seen it unwind is at the point of user acceptance testing, which is often so far down the track, right? Like nobody's been involved from the business or any real users have been involved any stage earlier. It hits user acceptance testing, which is often given like a 2-week time frame to get everything signed off, including any defects resolved. But what happens is the flood of feedback comes in. Like I've had, for example, that mobile devices one, where it was super simple that on the sign-in page, sometimes you have contractors and there was nowhere for a contractor to sign in. Like just the most simple use case out of all the use cases. So it's like, oh, we only identified that at user acceptance testing because people hadn't been involved earlier, before I came on board. Do you know what I mean? They just weren't involved. So you get this flood of feedback at user acceptance testing and that just blows out your timeline. Just blows it out. The other thing that can happen is that you just spin your wheels. So you just spin your wheels on discovery, design and development because there is no clarity around what you're actually trying to achieve. And what I would say as well is it's not the vendor's fault necessarily because exactly what you said, the client has to take some responsibility for successful implementation into their business. It's their business. Where I think vendors do take responsibility is the fact that they sell it as this shiny dream and they sell it that the client won't have to do any of that work, that they won't need their own project manager internally. And I'll always advocate, I'm like, you need a business-focused project manager. If your vendor is doing the technical build, they've got the technical project manager On your side, you need a business project manager who's going to go and liaise and engage with the business and understand exactly what you mentioned, the business processes, the offline processes, the ways of working in the business side. So that's kind of one thing. And then the other thing is sometimes around training. Sometimes they'll be like, we'll give you these template trainings. Oh my goodness, they are so high level. They don't teach you or tell you anything. And so, for example, like one, big provider, and they're like, oh yeah, you can use this suite of change management tools. I looked at them and I was like, completely useless. I think it was like an Office 365 rollout, and I was like, completely useless. So what I did actually was I created a few quick guides of like actual functionality, like what are the actual functionality changes? Not how do I open a Word document, but these new little features and functions in Word are amazing. And they're going, and here's how you can use them, and here's the opportunity that it gives you in your work and your day-to-day. So creating that. And then the last one is really be wary of vendor training. Actually, there's two more. One, really be wary of vendor training, because vendor training can sometimes, again, be at that high level. Maybe they don't know your business. Maybe they're not even planning to deliver training in your technical build. Maybe they're planning to just deliver training on the generic system, the demo version that you got shown. Or maybe they're like, just tick the box. Like I've worked with a client before, the vendor was going to deliver training and they're like, well, we don't really care about the effectiveness of the training. We don't care about the outcomes. As long as we deliver it, we're a tick and we've done our side. And I'm like, that's not a partnership from a vendor. That's not effective, and that's not going to help us actually reach success. So I feel like clients have this opportunity to, at the contract stage, at the negotiation stage, when you're deciding on that technology solution and on that vendor or whatever solution it is, ask the questions, tease them out. Hey, it says it's got this. What does that actually entail? What do you use behind that? Make sure that there's service level agreements for how defects will get resolved, for go live, for UAT. Make sure that you have service level agreements along the way. Because like for little things in the contract, if you tease them out and make sure that they get built in, that can really help your implementation all the way into the future. I think that's one of the reasons, as you mentioned, instead of bringing change in at the very 11th hour before you're about to go live, which is so often the case, actually, sometimes it might be, having a conversation with your change management team, if you've got a change management practice, to get a bit of advice at the start, or bringing in a consultant like you or I to kind of tease that out a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And actually help set that up for success in the really early stages. Then we can come back at the implementation stage and help you deliver. But at least having that advice of what to look out for in the early stages could save you months and millions and so much heartache and pain down the track.
Yeah, look, I've seen it so many times. Particularly when you call out the training. So the things in the contract, I think people are really deep into what it does when we get the contract negotiation. But as you say, that we don't have expertise on that. We get a lot of. I'm literally working with a client now. We've looked at the contract and they've said, 2 weeks of training. Well, what is that? Is that train? As you said, the scope of it is one thing. But is it train the trainer? Are you actually going to train all of the people? Because there's going to be a lot of users. And so those are the sorts of questions that need to ask. And I think you mentioned hypercare. So is it 2 weeks of hypercare? Is it 4 weeks? Is it based on number of users or customers or queries? These are all the questions that people are just so excited to sign the document and negotiate a lower rate. They forget to pick apart those really practical aspects. So I'm absolutely on board with that. Now, if we actually, look at these systems, you mentioned at the very beginning, it's not just a technology. It's not just an ERP or a CRM or any type of new tech that you're rolling out. You have to change your culture, your ways of working, how we engage with business customers. So why is that so often missed?
Probably the shiny dream sold by the technology vendor, where it's just this assumption that when people start using the new system, they will automatically transform everything about the way that they work, and that the system will drive the transformation for you. And look, there is something to be said for trying to drive transformation when you're working on a really clunky, outdated tools. Why would you expect to just put a system in front of somebody, in front of a whole group of people, sometimes thousands of people, and expect them to just be able to switch it on and use it, not just the using it there. But I always love to say, like data in, data out, right? Like quality data in, quality data out. But so much of the time, it's our offline processes, the way that we're working with things, the manual entries, the spreadsheets that we keep along the way. If you don't solve all that stuff, the data going in will never be quality. It will be poor, and it will screw up everything along the process, like internally in the system. And then the reports and everything that you get out of it, people stop trusting them. People are like, well, what's the point of even putting information in the system when I know that the reports off the other end are not accurate, or they're too late, or whatever? So it's like, if you're going to invest all of this time, money, effort, energy, you might as well actually streamline it and make sure that everything end to end in the flow. Every team knows what the team before them does. Every team knows what the team after them does and why they need that data and what it's good for. So I like to think about 3 areas of capability often when I'm working with clients, and they're particularly if they're doing a technology change. If it's a different type of change, if I'm working with them on an operating model or site move or something like that, like it'll be different. When it comes to technology, one of them is insights generation, because often they're sold, you're going to get all this reporting and dashboards. But reporting, dashboards and data, there's no use unless you're using it to make decisions. So if you don't build the capability of your people as to how to analyze the data, understand the dashboards, create dashboards that are relevant for you potentially, if you don't do that and then have them go, great, what does that mean? Let's make some decisions off the back of that. Let's try some actions and then let's review. If you don't do that, if you don't teach people how to do that process, often people are so stuck in their day-to-day, they'll never do it. And they will just keep using the reporting, dashboards and data as they do today. And often it's not used to drive business decision-making. One of the really early digital transformations I worked on, we called it the Make It Count program. And and this was again from doing the benefits mapping, it was like make it count, and it was like every dollar, every asset, every person, every decision, because we understood that the whole reason we were putting in this finance system was to empower better decision-making for the community. That was a community-based organisation. That's the reason we were doing everything. So insights generation is such a core capability, and people don't naturally have that often. Like we're in school, we're kind of taught yes, no answers, not necessarily that critical thinking, interrogating, but then also action planning and like reviewing and assessing and not feeling like a failure if something doesn't work, but instead going, great, that didn't quite go as we want, experimenting. How do we do it differently? How do we make these numbers move? So insights generation. Another one is coaching capability. I think change and transformation opens up such an opportunity for leaders to learn how to coach their people, like building that capability with leaders, how to lead and coach change. And I think that's going to be even more important for the future of work as we start to see more AI and automation take jobs. We know that that is already starting. We need to empower our people to start taking their own career into their own hands, because it can't all rest with leaders. Leaders just won't have the answers. Sometimes it'll be the leaders' roles that are impacted. So how do we empower people? And that's through coaching, not through telling. And then the last one, business partnering. Maybe it's not your business, maybe it's partnering with the community, but it's like, how can you actually create those trusted partnerships with your customers, your clients, or your community, or whoever are your external stakeholders, and stop being tactical and really kind of like on the fly and ad hoc and in the moment, and actually start working with your customers, clients, community in a really strategic way, thinking about the future and helping them get their outcomes. Because I think that's where most businesses will unlock new value, is by actually being more strategic and starting to partner with their customers, clients, and community in the future. Those things, they don't happen just because you put a new system in. Like, they are things that you have to actively go and spend time on and build. But when you do them, that system could create such an abundance of potential and pathways available for your business and your business's growth. Like, that's what transforms.
Lata, this has been amazing. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I really love the insights of how you bring everything together not just the tech, but the people and everything around it. And a business is an ecosystem and everything has to work together. And I love how you say everyone has a part to play. It's not just leaders. It actually is everyone. How can our listeners reach you?
You can always find me on LinkedIn. I should be the only Lata Hamilton there, so Lata, Lata. But yeah, I post so much on LinkedIn. And then, come check me out. I'm at passionpioneers.com.au. Or for more personal stuff, career and change management focused stuff, it's latahamilton.com.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe. Taking just 2 minutes to leave a review on Apple Podcasts would mean the world. Your reviews play a vital role in expanding the reach of this podcast and making a bigger impact.